Park hurried through the crowded corridors of Orbital Station 17, trying to ignore the curious glances from passing aliens. His companion droid, Ram-9, limped alongside him, its left leg actuator emitting a high-pitched whine with each step. The noise drew even more unwanted attention. "Please slow down, sir," Ram-9 said, struggling to keep pace. "My movement systems are operating at only 63% efficiency." Ta sighed and stopped, allowing the droid to catch up. He'd spent the last 3 days trying to fix the actuator himself, but his trembling hands had only made things worse. Now several of Ram-9's secondary systems were also malfunctioning. "We're almost there," Ta muttered, more to himself than to the droid. He hated being in the busier sections of the station. Too many people, too many chances for someone to recognize him. The repair district buzzed with activity. Vendors called out to passersby, advertising everything from neural enhancements to quantum stabilizers. The air smelled of ozone, lubricant, and the distinct sense of a dozen different alien species. Todd pulled his worn jacket tighter around himself, as if it could somehow shield him from the world. "Sir, my navigation system suggests Jin's Universal Repairs is located in the next sector," Rem-9 said, its voice processor now developing an occasional stutter. "RR reviews indicate high satisfaction rates among both organic and mechanical clients." Todd nodded without speaking. He'd researched every repair shop on the station before settling on this one. Jin's was small, discreet, and most importantly, run by a Vexillian. The reptilian aliens were known for their exceptional diagnostic abilities and their tendency to mind their own business. The shop was nestled between a food dispensary and a parts supplier, its entrance marked by a simple holographic sign that shifted between several galactic languages. As the door slid open, Ty was hit by the scent of metal polish and synthetic lubricant. Inside, the shop was larger than it appeared from outside. Tools and mechanical parts hung from every available surface in what appeared to be organized chaos. Workbenches lined the walls, each one cluttered with projects in various stages of completion. "Hello," Ta called out, his voice sounding too loud in the quiet space. Movement from the back of the shop caught his attention. A Vexillian emerged from behind a tall shelf, wiping her hands on a cloth. Her skin shifted through shades of blue as she approached, sensory appendages around her head gently swaying with each step. "Welcome to Jin's Universal Repairs," she said, her voice carrying the characteristic harmonic undertone of her species. "I am Jin." Ta had met Vexillians before, but he still found their appearance unsettling. Jin stood slightly taller than him, her reptilian features smoothed out in a way that somehow made her seem both alien and familiar at once. Her eyes, large and multifaceted, focused first on Rem-9, then shifted to Ta. "My droid needs repairs," Ta said, gesturing to Rem-9. "Left actuator malfunction, and some secondary systems are acting up." Jin tilted her head in that uncanny way Vexillians had when their diagnostic senses were active. But strangely, she seemed to be studying Ta rather than the droid. "Yes, your droid needs repairs," she agreed, her skin shifting to a deeper blue. "But you—" "Just the droid," Ta interrupted sharply. "How much will it cost and how long will it take?" Jin's mouth curved slightly in what might have been a smile. "May I examine the unit first?" Without waiting for permission, she crouched beside Rem-9 and placed a hand on its chest panel. The droid's indicator lights flickered in response. "This is a Rem-9 personal assistant model," Jin said. "Modified extensively. Your work." Tai shifted uncomfortably. "Some of it. Can you fix it or not?" Jin's sensory appendages rippled slightly. "Of course. The primary issue is the left actuator, but there's cascade failure affecting the neural network. Power distribution is uneven, causing the stuttering and the optical flicker." Ta blinked in surprise. He hadn't mentioned the stuttering, and the optical flicker was so subtle he'd only noticed it this morning. 3 days for full repairs," Jin said, standing up. "Payment can be discussed when you return." Something about the way she was looking at him made Ty deeply uncomfortable. It felt as if she could see through his carefully constructed walls to the broken man beneath. "Fine," he said, stepping back toward the door. "I'll return in 3 days." "Wait," Jin called. "I need authorization to access memory banks for diagnostic purposes." Ty hesitated. "Just stay out of the personal interaction files." "Of course." Jin turned to the droid. "Rem-9, please remain here for repairs. Your owner will return in 3 standard days." "Yes, Technician Jin," Rem-9 responded, its voice still stuttering. "Ty, will you be all right without me?" The question hung in the air, loaded with meaning that Ty didn't want to acknowledge. The droid had been his only companion for the past 3 years. "I'll be fine," he said shortly. "Just cooperate with the repairs." As he turned to leave, Jin spoke again. "Former engineer, aren't you?" Ty froze, his hand on the door panel. "What makes you say that?" "The modifications to Rem-9 are expert level. Your hands show the calluses of someone who works with precision tools." Jin's head tilted again. "And you carry yourself like someone used to being respected for their mind." "You're mistaken," Ta said, not turning around. "I'll be back in 3 days." As the door slid closed behind him, Tag released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Jin had seen too much already. Maybe he should find another repair shop, one with a less perceptive technician. But RM9 needed those repairs, and Ty couldn't do them himself. Not anymore. He made his way back through the crowded corridors, feeling oddly vulnerable without RM9's familiar presence beside him. The droid had been more than just an assistant. It had been a buffer between him and the rest of the world. 3 days without RM9. 3 days alone with his thoughts and memories. Tay's hands began to tremble slightly, and he shoved them into his pockets. Back in his small quarters, Ta sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the empty charging station where RM9 usually stood. The silence felt oppressive. 3 days, he muttered to himself. "I can manage 3 days." But as he lay down to sleep that night, Ty couldn't shake the memory of Jin's penetrating gaze. The way she had looked at him, not at Rem-9. As if the droid wasn't the only one in need of repair. Ty arrived at Jin's universal repairs exactly 3 days later. He'd spent those days alone in his quarters, avoiding the crowded corridors of Orbital Station 17. Without RM9, he felt exposed, vulnerable. The droid had been his shield against unwanted conversations and memories for 3 years. The shop door slid open with a soft hiss. Ta stepped inside, expecting to see RM9 waiting for him, fully repaired. Instead, he found Jin bent over a disassembled navigation unit, her blue skin shifting to a concentrated purple as she worked. "You're late," she said without looking up. Ta checked his wrist display. "I'm right on time." For humans, perhaps. Vixilians operate on a more precise schedule. Jin set down her tools and turned to face him. "Your droid isn't ready." "What?" "You said 3 days." "I said 3 days for full repairs, assuming standard damage." Rem-9's neural network had extensive corruption beyond the physical damage. Jin gestured to a workbench in the corner where Rem-9 lay partially disassembled. "The actuator is fixed, but the cascade failure affected memory storage units. That requires more time." Ty ran a hand through his dark hair, frustrated. "How much longer?" 2 more days. Maybe less." Jin tilted her head, studying him. "You seem distressed without your droid." "I just need it working again." Jin's sensory appendages rippled slightly. "I could use assistance with calibration. Help me for 2 hours, and I'll waive the repair fee. I don't work on other people's machines." Former engineer Ta Park doesn't work on machines anymore. Jin's multifaceted eyes gleamed. "The one who designed the atmospheric regulators for the Epsilon colonies." Todd felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. "How did you?" "Customers talk. I listen." Jin handed him a calibration tool. 2 hours of your expertise for free repairs. Fair exchange." Ty stared at the tool, his mind racing. No one on this station was supposed to know who he was. He'd been careful, changed his appearance, kept to himself. Yet this alien mechanic had identified him after one brief meeting. "Fine," he said finally, taking the tool. 2 hours. Jin led him to a workbench covered with delicate components. These sensor arrays need precise calibration. The station's hospital ordered them for their diagnostic equipment. Tay recognized the components, high-end neural interfaces designed to map brain activity. He'd worked with similar technology before the accident. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the first array. "Problem?" Jin asked, noticing his hesitation. "It's been a while," Ty admitted. Jin adjusted the lighting over the workbench. Like riding a bicycle, as humans say. They worked in silence for a while, Ta gradually finding his rhythm. The familiar work was both comforting and painful, a reminder of the life he'd lost. After about an hour, he realized the tremor in his hands had lessened. "Your technique is efficient," Jin commented, "but your grip causes unnecessary strain. Try holding the calibrator like this." She demonstrated a slightly different position. Reluctantly, Ty adjusted his grip. The tremor decreased further. "Better," Jin said. "Your neural pathways show damage patterns, similar to what I see in damaged servos." Ty nearly dropped the sensor array. "You can't possibly." "Vixillions see systems, Ta. Mechanical, biological, all systems have patterns. Yours are," interrupted. Jin continued working as if she hadn't said anything remarkable. "The accident at Epsilon Station caused physical damage to your hands and neural network, yes." Ta set down his tools, anger rising. "That's none of your business. As a repair specialist, I notice broken things." Jin shrugged, a surprisingly human gesture. "Your droid shows signs of extensive modification to compensate for your physical limitations. Self-repair attempt." "I don't need fixing," Ta said coldly. Jin's skin shifted to a calm blue. "Perhaps not. But RM9 does, and you're helping me pay for those repairs. Let's continue." They worked for another hour, Jin occasionally suggesting small adjustments to Ta's technique. Each time, the work became slightly easier, the precision a little better. By the end of the 2 hours, Ta had calibrated 6 sensor arrays with greater accuracy than he'd thought possible. "Your time is up," Jin said, "but I could use similar help tomorrow. Paid work this time." Ta hesitated. The familiar rhythm of technical work had been more satisfying than he wanted to admit. For a few hours, he'd felt like his old self, before the accident, before the failures, before the shame. "I'll think about it," he said finally. Jin nodded. "Come back tomorrow either way. I'll have more information about RM9's repairs." As Tai turned to leave, Jin added, "The station's central processor shows 3 repair tickets for your quarters this month. Environmental control issues." "How do you know that?" "I have maintenance contracts with station management. They mentioned Unit 4722 has recurring problems." "That's my unit," Tai confirmed reluctantly. "The problem is station-wide. Outdated algorithms in the central system." Jin's expression was unreadable. "Someone with your background could probably solve it permanently instead of these temporary fixes." Todd felt a familiar itch in his mind. The problem-solving instinct he'd suppressed for 3 years. The station engineers should handle it. "They lack your expertise." Jin handed him a small device. "Neural stabilizer. It may help with the tremors while you're without your droid." "I don't need payment for your work today," Jin interrupted, "unless you prefer credits." Ta pocketed the device without commenting. "Tomorrow, then." When Tay returned to his quarters, he found himself studying the environmental control panel with new interest. The neural stabilizer sat untouched on his desk until a particularly bad tremor made him drop his dinner utensil. Reluctantly, he attached the small device to his temple. The effect was immediate, a calming hum that seemed to smooth the jagged edges of his nervous system. The tremor subsided, and with it some of the constant pain he'd lived with for 3 years. "Damn it," he muttered, realizing Jin had been right about his neural damage. That night, Ta slept better than he had in months. When he woke, he found himself thinking about the station's environmental control system. Almost without conscious decision, he began sketching the solution on his datapad. The next morning, he returned to Jin's shop earlier than agreed. She looked up from Rem-9's partially reassembled form, her sensory appendages rippling in what might have been surprise. "I'll take that job," Ta said, "and I have some ideas about the station's environmental system." Jin's skin shifted to a pleased golden hue. "I thought you might." A week had passed since Ta first brought Rem-9 to Jin's universal repairs. What began as 2 hours of assistance had somehow turned into regular work at the shop. Jin paid him fairly for his expertise, and Ta found himself slipping back into the rhythms of engineering with surprising ease. "Hand me the molecular bonder," Jin said, her attention focused on the delicate circuitry of a medical scanner. Without looking up, she added, "The modified one with the cushioned grip." Ta passed her the tool, noticing how she always suggested the equipment that caused him the least pain. The neural stabilizer she had given him helped with the tremors, but his damaged hand still ached after hours of detailed work. "Try these," Jin said during their midday break, placing a container on the table between them. Inside were small, blue-tinted protein cubes. For energy. They contain nutrients that support neural repair. Tai raised an eyebrow, but took one anyway. After 3 years of isolation, he found Jin's directness oddly refreshing. She never pitied him or treated his injuries as something shameful. The station administrator called. Jin mentioned casually as they ate, "Your environmental control fix has reduced power consumption by 14%. Ta nodded, hiding a small smile. The solution had been simple once he allowed himself to think like an engineer again. The algorithms were cycling too frequently. They just needed better timing parameters. "He wants to know if you'd look at the water recycling system next." Jin's skin shifted to an inquisitive turquoise. "I said I'd ask." Before Tai could respond, the shop door slid open, and a tall insectoid Karethi entered. The alien's multi-jointed limbs moved with jerky motions, and one antenna hung limply. "Jin," the Karethi clicked in their native language. "My translator is malfunctioning. Cannot communicate with humans in my research team." Ta surprised himself by stepping forward. "I can understand you," he said in careful Karethi. His pronunciation was rough, but the alien's compound eyes widened in recognition. "You speak the language of the hive?" the Karethi asked. "A little," Tai admitted. "I worked with Karethi engineers on the Epsilon project." As Jin examined the translator device, Ta found himself engaged in conversation with the alien scientist. Dr. Krill was researching interspecies neural patterns, work that paralleled Ta's old projects before the accident. "Your translator needs a full neural recalibration," Jin announced after several minutes of examination. "It will take 2 days." Dr. Krill's mandibles clicked in distress. "Important presentation tomorrow. Need translation." "Tai could attend with you," Jin suggested. "He understands Karethi and could translate manually." Ta shot her a sharp look, but Jin continued speaking to Dr. Krill as if she hadn't noticed. "He's highly qualified in neural engineering. Might even have valuable input for your research." Before Tai could object, the arrangements were made. He found himself agreeing to attend a scientific presentation for the first time in 3 years. That evening, as he prepared to leave the shop, Jin handed him a small device, Enhanced Neural Stabilizer, for tomorrow's presentation. "I didn't ask for your help," Ta said, though there was less edge to his voice than there might have been a week ago. "You didn't ask for the tremors either," Jin replied simply. "Systems seek balance. I provide tools to restore it." The next morning, Ta stood before his reflection, barely recognizing himself in formal clothes. The enhanced neural stabilizer at his temple was nearly invisible, but its effects were profound. His hands were steady, and the constant background pain had faded to a dull whisper. Dr. Krill's presentation to the station's scientific community went smoothly. Ta translated the technical terms with precision, occasionally adding clarification that the translator device would have missed. When questions arose about human neural patterns, he found himself drawn into the discussion, offering insights from his own research. "You have extensive knowledge," Dr. Krill said afterward. "Would value your consultation on human aspects of our project." Ta hesitated only briefly. "I'd be interested in hearing more." When he returned to Jin's shop that afternoon, REM-9 was fully assembled and powered up. The droid's movements were smooth, with no sign of the previous malfunction. "Ta!" REM-9 exclaimed. "Jin has made remarkable improvements to my systems. Efficiency is up 23%. "Good," Ta said, feeling strangely conflicted about the reunion. Part of him had expected to feel immediate relief at having his buffer against the world restored. Instead, he felt a curious reluctance to return to his isolated routine. "How was the presentation?" Jin asked, her skin a neutral blue that didn't quite hide her interest. "Dr. Krill offered me a consulting position on her research team," Tai admitted. "Part-time." Jin's skin flushed golden for a moment before returning to blue. "Will you accept?" "I'm considering it." Ta looked around the shop, at the projects he'd helped with over the past week. "But I'd still like to continue working here, if that's acceptable." "The arrangement is mutually beneficial," Jin agreed, her tone matter-of-fact despite the pleased ripple of her sensory appendages. Over the next 2 weeks, Tai settled into a new routine. Mornings at Jin's shop, afternoons at the research lab with Dr. Krill's team, evenings working on station improvement projects. REM-9 remained his companion, but no longer his shield. The droid seemed to adapt to Ta's changing circumstances with programmed flexibility. "Jin has invited us to join her for the stellar alignment viewing tonight," REM-9 announced one morning. "The station's observation deck will be opened specially for the event." Ta looked up from the delicate quantum stabilizer he was repairing. "Us. You and me," REM-9 clarified. She mentioned several other technical specialists will attend. A professional gathering. The old Ta would have refused immediately. Social events, even professional ones, had been strictly avoided since the accident. But the neural exercises Jin had been subtly teaching him were working. His hands were steadier each day, and the dark thoughts that had plagued him for years were less frequent. "Tell her we'll be there," Ta said, surprising himself. That evening, as the station rotated to face a rare alignment of 3 nearby stars, Ta found himself standing among a small group of engineers and scientists. Jin moved through the gathering, introducing him to colleagues who knew of his work from before the accident. "Your environmental control modifications have been implemented on 3 other stations in this sector," a human engineer told him. "Brilliant work." As the stellar alignment reached its peak, bathing the observation deck in golden light, Tay realized something had shifted inside him. The wall he built between himself and the world had begun to crumble. Later, as the gathering dispersed, he overheard Jin speaking quietly to REM-9 in a corner of the observation deck. "His neural patterns show significant improvement," she said. "The rehabilitation exercises are working better than expected." "I have been encouraging him to complete them daily," REM-9 replied. "He doesn't realize they were designed to heal his neural damage." "Good," Jin said. "Some repairs must be subtle to be effective." Ta stepped back quietly, processing what he'd heard. Far from feeling manipulated, he felt a curious sense of gratitude. Jin had seen what he needed when he couldn't see it himself. The next morning, when Jin handed him a set of calibration exercises for improved tool control, Tay accepted them without comment. But as he worked, he watched Jin with new understanding. She wasn't just fixing machines. She was fixing him, piece by piece, circuit by circuit, synapse by synapse. And for the first time in 3 years, he was willing to be repaired. 3 months had passed since Ta first brought REM-9 to Jin's universal repairs. The shop had changed dramatically in that time. What was once a small repair business now occupied twice the space, with a new sign beside the original, Integrated Recovery Services. Ta moved through the busy shop, his steps confident and his hands steady. The neural interface at his temple was now a sleeker model, barely visible against his skin. It was the third prototype he and Jin had developed together, a remarkable fusion of Vexillian diagnostic technology and human neural engineering. Tai, the ambassador from Dakmar, has arrived, Rem 9 announced, approaching with smooth, efficient movements. The droid had been upgraded several times over the past months, now serving as Ta's assistant rather than his shield. Thank you, Wariem. Show them to consultation room 2. Ta finished adjusting a neural scanner and wiped his hands on a cloth. The ambassador's case was particularly interesting. Neural damage similar to what Tai had suffered, but with the unique physiology of the Dakmar species. As he walked toward the consultation room, Ta passed Jin working with a young human woman. The woman's hands shook badly as she attempted to hold a simple tool. Jin was guiding her through the same exercises she had once taught Ta. Small movements first, Jin was saying, her skin a gentle, encouraging blue. The neural pathways need to relearn the patterns. Ta smiled to himself. Jin's approach hadn't changed. She still saw all broken systems as worthy of repair, whether mechanical or biological. What had changed was that others now recognized her gift. The consultation with the Dakmar ambassador went well. Their neural damage had been caused by exposure to unusual radiation, not trauma as Ta's had been, but the results were similar. Our medical experts say the damage is permanent, the ambassador said, their translucent skin pulsing with distress colors. They're working from an incomplete understanding, Tai explained, displaying scans of his own neural network on a large screen. These are my brain patterns 3 months ago, and these are current scans. The improvement is significant. The ambassador leaned forward, hope visible in their shifting colors. And you believe similar results are possible for me? With modifications for Dakmar physiology, yes. Ta touched the interface at his temple. This device, combined with targeted exercises and treatments, has restored most of my function. Jin and I have adapted the technology for several species now. Later, after the ambassador had left with a treatment plan and the first prototype interface, designed for Dakmar biology, Ta found Jin in her private workshop at the back of the facility. Success, she asked, looking up from a complex circuit assembly. They'll return next week to begin treatment. Ta sat across from her, picking up a small tool and automatically adjusting his grip in the way she had taught him. It's remarkable how similar the neural patterns are across species. Damage manifests in nearly identical ways. Jin's skin shifted to a thoughtful purple. All systems follow patterns. The universe has limited variations. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, each focused on their separate projects. Jin was developing a new diagnostic tool for detecting neural damage in its earliest stages. Todd was refining the interface design to make it more universally adaptable. The station administrator called. Jin said eventually, "Our waiting list has grown to 63 patients from 8 different species. He's offering additional space in the medical sector." Tai leaned back, considering. "We're already working at capacity. We could train others." Jin set down her tools, her skin rippling with excitement. "Create a proper treatment center. Your human medical knowledge combined with Vexillian diagnostic techniques." The old Tai would have recoiled from such visibility, such responsibility. But months of healing had changed him. His hands no longer trembled. The nightmares about the Epsilon Station accident had faded. He had stepped out of the shadows of his past failure and found purpose again. We'd need more staff. Equipment. Ta was already thinking through the logistics. Training protocols for the treatments. Dr. Krill has expressed interest in expanding our research partnership, Jin noted. And that human neurologist from Central Station, Dr. Lee, has requested a 3-month observation position. Ta smiled. "You've already been planning this." Jin's skin flushed a slightly embarrassed gold. Considering possibilities, it is what I do. That evening, after the shop had closed, Tai and Jin sat in the small break room reviewing patient files. Rem9 brought them tea, a Vexillion blend that Jin had introduced Ta to during his early recovery. "Do you remember what you said when you first came to my shop?" Jin asked suddenly. Ta looked up from his datapad. "I believe I said, just fix the droid. And now you fix people." Jin's expression was unreadable, but her skin glowed with a warm blue that Tai had come to recognize as satisfaction. "We fix people," Tai corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Jin tilted her head, her sensory appendages rippling gently. 3 months ago, your neural damage was severe. Your isolation was self-imposed but no less damaging. Now you lead consultations with ambassadors and plan treatment centers. You saw what I couldn't see, Tai admitted. That I needed repair as much as Rem9 did. All intelligence systems recognize their malfunctions eventually, Jin said. Some just need diagnostic assistance. The next morning, Ta stood before the expanded facility, watching as the new sign was installed. Integrated Recovery Services now had its own entrance, separate from but connected to Jin's original repair shop. Patients began arriving shortly after. Beings of various species with neural injuries that traditional medicine had deemed untreatable. Some moved with the help of mechanical aids. Others showed the subtle signs of neural damage that Tai had once tried to hide. Tremors, sensory disruptions, coordination problems. Each patient was evaluated using the combined approach Tai and Jin had developed. Mechanical assessment of the biological system, followed by a customized treatment plan that blended technology with rehabilitation. "You have a new patient in room 3, Rem9 informed Ta mid-morning, a human engineer from the Epsilon colonies. Neural damage similar to your original condition. Tai felt a momentary tightness in his chest. Epsilon, where his career had ended, where he had failed to prevent the accident that injured dozens, including himself. Jin appeared beside him, her skin shifting to a calming blue. "Some repairs close more than physical circuits," she said quietly. Ta nodded, squaring his shoulders. "Some repairs heal the past." As he entered the consultation room, Ta saw a young woman sitting nervously, hands hidden in her lap. The look in her eyes was one he recognized all too well. Shame, frustration, the belief that her condition was permanent. "I'm Ta Park," he said, sitting across from her. He deliberately placed his hands on the table where she could see them. Steady now, but bearing the subtle scars of his own journey. "I understand you were injured at Epsilon Station." The woman nodded, reluctantly showing her trembling hands. "They say the damage can't be fixed." Ta smiled, touching the neural interface at his temple. 3 months ago, I came to this station believing the same thing about myself. I was wrong. He reached for a scanner, his movements fluid and precise, a demonstration of what was possible. "All systems can be repaired," he said, echoing Jin's words from their first meeting. "Even the most complex ones. Especially those